Okay. I'm really bad. All right. So what is it? So let's take a few minutes on transfer tasks. So I usually don't do this in the rigorous PBL, the foundation stuff, but I want us to play with this a little bit. What is a transfer task? A transfer task, once we get to transfer, from deep to transfer, we're really trying to help kids see the differences between two different contexts. It is like this game. Remember this? Remember these, where you're trying to spot the differences between both of these? That's what I want learners to be able to do at transfer. And even though the interesting thing about PBL is that it has this really interesting paradox as a method. The idea behind PBL is to move to transfer, but because it is so context rich, it only has one situation, students can never fully get to transfer because the idea is to be able to understand it in one context and move it to another. Okay? Our goal is to try to teach kids this one. How do I understand this situation, and then give them a new situation and see if they can transfer? Okay? Let me give you an example of that. I want you to take a couple minutes here, and I'd like you to just read this problem. This is a military problem. I want you to just take a couple minutes, read this, and I want you to talk in your group for about 2 minutes on what should they do. And we'll come back. I'm not touching this.
The example you just gave of spot the differences, isn't that more like a deep task? You're comparing the...
Oh, we're comparing situations. We're not comparing two different concepts. So, like, if I'm trying to understand...
Oh, comparing a situation. Oh,
yes.
Okay.
Has everybody read this? Okay. Before we start talking, I want you to read the next one, and we're going to talk about what seems to be the differences between these. Here's the second one. So I'd like you to take a couple minutes at your group and see if you can come up with a solution to this problem. We'll come back in about 4 minutes. The solution to this problem right here. What type of procedure might be used to destroy the tumor with the rays and at the same time avoid destroying the healthy tissue? Just take a couple minutes, see what we can come up with. All right, let's come back. So here's the answer. This is the answer. Right? This is the answer to this problem. Basically, it's this. To avoid collateral damage, disperse your forces and converge at the point of attack. That's the central message behind both of these contexts. Okay? They have done countless research on this. And because we're in a PBL class where we're talking about transfer, we can see that. But 99.9% of the time, when they were doing this in research, people could not connect the dots between both of these. Even they said, read this text, now read this, what do you think the solution would be? Most people said, I'm not a doctor. Or, I don't know, you need to give me more information. When really, the answer is actually in both of these contexts, and it is this. To avoid collateral damage, disperse your forces and converge at the point of attack. Students need to be intentionally taught this kind of work. Like looking at the Nairobi National Park context, looking at the sea otter context, and being able to say, what seems to be the common message. That is, if you move something out or put something in, it changes the dynamic of an environment. It changes the energy. So far, so good? So we are going to look at how to develop some transfer tasks that can really move student learning forward. And there's 3 things I'm going to throw to you. One is you need to make the transfer task perplexing, complex for kids. There's not an easy solution to this. Now, here's the thing that I've heard a lot of PBL folks kind of say, like, you want to give them a challenging problem and have them solve it. What I would say is you want to give them a challenging problem and let them attempt to solve it. Do not assume they can solve a problem that adults haven't solved. They are not experts. They are developing expertise. That doesn't mean we don't treat them with respect. Don't hear me wrong. But what that means is don't expect them to actually answer the question. When they present it to you, it's okay if they're like, I don't know the right answer. We're still struggling with this. Yeah, so's everybody else. That Nairobi project, okay? There's like hundreds and hundreds of people working on that from ministries, from the government, from United Nations, from researchers. Like all these people are trying to come to this particular kind of problem. I'm not worried about that. What I'm really interested in is, can kids take the core content and can they apply it to different contexts? That's number 1. Number 2, it should be purposeful. Like, give them a problem that's really important. If you're giving them a project on the zombie apocalypse, I'm sorry, that's not purposeful. Like, they might like zombies, that's fine, but you're not giving them like a real problem, in my opinion. If it's part of like a standard where you want them to write a comic on the zombie apocalypse, fine. But for the most part, give them something that they really should be going after that's really engaging them. The third one is have them look at multiple perspectives. You might look at that Nairobi project and say, I love wildebeests. Yeah, and I don't think that the Maasai hate them. Right? They're not against you. Focus on interests, not positions. So when students are actually engaging in transfer level problems, we have to have them look at multiple perspectives, not just through their own eyes or through the eyes of their teacher. Does that make sense? So let me give you a couple of ideas. How do you make something perplexing? 1, throw twists at them. What does that mean? Change the expectations of transfer level work within the same context. They were going to do a PowerPoint presentation for you. Now they're going to write an op-ed. You change the task on them when they're doing transfer. Why? Because that pushes them to go back to focus on deep level learning, because kids have a tendency to skip from surface to transfer. Everybody okay so far? Is the pizza, has it sunk in? Are we out? No, we're good. So here's some. So what's that?
How do you do that with kids without them being like, oh, screw you? Yeah, you have to do that like early on, I imagine.
So here's what I would say. What I would say is that, so one way you can do it is by giving them an additional event. Not just the entry event, but like a new letter that's coming from that external audience. The other is be upfront with them. Things will change in this. It's not always static. I'm sorry, when you do this problem, like things happen. Kenya could lose money. There could be a bombing at the embassy, and things have changed, right? There could be a coup. Things change, and there are dynamics that happen all the time in real life. And what I would just say to kids is, this is life. Things change. I need to make sure you know these things. Oh, after they've done this a couple times, they're fine. It's just the first couple. Okay? So here's like a couple of examples. A nonprofit group has unfortunately lost its funding and is no longer able to bring a group out to see your presentation. We would ask that you submit a written summary of your conclusions instead. Okay? So you were going to present. You were getting ready for your presentation. Now we're going to do that. Now what I want them to do is synthesize. So synthesize your conclusions. That requires reading, writing, and talking at the transfer level. It just makes a little bit of a change for them at the transfer level. And I think, and here's the thing, they won't love it, but they're going to survive. Here's another one. Turns. And I will make sure you get all of this stuff, okay? Actually, in that resource I gave you yesterday, there are tons and tons of routines you could use at the transfer level to get them to do these things, okay? I just want to give you a little preview. Design a change in a variable related to a given task within the same project. Let me give you some examples. The number of articles posted on this topic lack nuance we would like to see. Please conclude your essay with a more engaging ending. So let's say that they all had the ending where they had to just synthesize the conclusion, but now you're pushing them to use like metaphor, a cliffhanger, something that's different in that piece that they're presenting. That's kind of pushing that task a little bit more. We just received word that we are required to no longer take accumulated interest for granted. Initiate a means for addressing this new wrinkle. Okay, we just went into way more complex mathematics for kids. Because they're saying, look, we're not holding this constant anymore. Now we're doing it this way. You can't ignore air resistance anymore. Right? Because I always loved that. When I was in physics, it was always like, you don't have to worry about these things. And you know what? I didn't worry about them. Until I got into college, and they're like, these are things you need to worry about. And I was like, I don't know what they are, right? Totally freaked out. But these are some things you could change. So changing the task on them, changing just a little bit of part of the situation, can really, really support students in being able to develop transfer level work. Here's another one. Design a new problem within a new context. This is the one we talked about a little while ago. So design a solution for removing a population rather than reintroducing a species. Craft a critique for how your conclusions would relate to the following situation. Okay, so you thought this. Now I want you to work with this group. How would you critique that situation? Is everybody okay so far? I'm going pretty quick, but I wanted to throw just some ideas at you around this particular situation. Yes?
So knowing how sixth graders can get confused in the PBL process, what I appreciate is how you have shown the surface heat and transfer.
Yep.
And that helps go step back a little and make sure projects are done in a way that I feel I can take a student to this. I'm still wondering in my head, thinking how students are going to accept a change on them when they're still on the learning curve. You have to really make sure they know that deep before you can change up a transfer.
Yeah, I agree.
Because otherwise, and then there's always some that aren't there yet. So do they stay in the same, and is it really changed for the norm of the class?
I don't think you have to change this for every single learner. You could change it for some. You could say with these learners, this is the new situation. Or I'm changing the task just a little bit. Yeah. Yeah, push the task a little bit and say, I want you to look at it like this while I'm still working with these learners on this. I think that's okay. It's still, the other students that aren't getting that piece are still they're working from surface to deep and getting some of the level of transfer. But with some other learners, you're able to differentiate and nudge that a little bit more.
Yeah. And they don't get bored.
Well, theoretically, yeah.
Do you ever have kids not do the transfer task because it's really obvious that they don't know the surface and deep stuff?
I mostly have students that do the transfer and try to mask that they don't know surface and deep. Actually, that's what I would say is 99.9% of what I see when I go into project-based classes. Is kids present something, I'm like, if I threw this curveball at them, would they be able to hit it? And I doubt it. Because I think they're like beholden to Wiki.
I agree. So do you ever tell kids, you're not going to do this presentation? Like, you need to show me that you can do this.
No, because I think there's a good level of public presentation, public pressure when I'm like, you're going to present, but here's some differences. I'm going to ask you questions while you're presenting. Like, we'll stop you. We'll ask questions. I'm going to preface with the people that come in as part of the panel to ask you questions. And it takes panel members a little while to get used to this because they're like, why are you so hard on the kids? It's like, I'm not hard on them. I'm hard on their learning. I need to make sure that they know this. So I'm going to throw some things at them. Again, it's okay if they don't have the most sophisticated solution. I'm more interested in is, are they applying that their thinking from surface and deep to a new situation, right? At the end, that's what I'm really going after. Does that make sense? And then I want to throw perspective at you for just a minute. And that is trying to get students, if you give them a project and let's say that they're solving a problem for you, try to get them to a place where they switch perspectives. So even if you don't want to change the context, let's say that they're doing a project and they are looking at it from the eyes of Scout and To Kill a Mockingbird. Pick another lens in which to look through the next day. How would you look at this from this character, from Atticus, from this, right? Like whoever, change the perspective. This was one of the most shocking things for me. I mean, when I was young, and I shared this, I think, with a few folks yesterday. When I was young, I read the story of Beowulf, right? A hero, right? And Beowulf's whole story, his whole idea was that he slayed a monster that was destroying his village, right? And then I was in college, and I read this book called Grendel, right? Yeah, what an amazing book. And it was about this creature who lost his mother, right? These soldiers came, and they killed his mother, and then he went into his cave and wanted to be left alone. And these soldiers kept coming and pestering him and trying to kill him. And then he left his cave, went out and slaughtered many of the people in this village until he was slayed by Beowulf. Right? So it's all about perspective. So even if they're doing a transfer level problem, if you can flip the perspective of what would this look like if you were from the Maasai? What would it look like if you were from the Kenyan Wildlife Service? What would it look like if you were an oil company? Whatever. What would be different perspectives? So any way that you can kind of nudge a student to see it differently helps them start to see the content playing in different places. And that, in essence, is what we're trying to get to with transfer. So I would suggest, like with your next project, just do a little bit of a nudge. Just try a little bit of this. Like, say, I want you to look at this from this perspective. Maybe just start there. Or say, tomorrow we're going to just look at a new context for 20 minutes. What do you think? How do you think this content will play with that? Because if they can't do that part of it, we didn't get them to transfer. Right? That's the whole idea behind this. Questions? Thoughts on that? Nothing. It's perfect. It does. Yeah.
It's one of the later things to form in the brain. So is there any coincidence that transfer and empathy are parallels here?
I think it's a good question. I think it takes some experience to be able to get to that level of empathy, right? I think we always start from our own lens first before we can go out and see others. Like when you look at emotional intelligence, it's really built on 4 components. I'm self-aware, I can manage myself. Then I'm socially aware, and I can socially manage. I think it's the same in learning core content. I need to know enough so that I can then step myself outside of it and look at it in different ways. And that's what we have been trying to do for years in project-based learning, is getting kids to take the core content and apply it to different places. But usually we just do it in one context. So my idea to you is either change the context on them, or shift some things within the context, whether you look at it from this lens to this lens, or you change the task a bit, that you will see kids present at a much higher level by doing some things like that. Even if they're just little tiny twists and turns, just turn it a bit, and you'll see a higher level of efficacy, I think. So let's do this, because we are now at rest and digest mode. I can see it. Let's take about 15 minutes, because we're going to wrap up right in about 45 minutes. Let's take about 15 minutes. Let's look at one of the projects we're working on, or if you want to do a new one, and say in 15 minutes, what could I do to enhance my project, or what changes would I want to make? We'll come back, debrief them, and be done. Sound good? All right, let's do it.